The trans are back in the chat, so sit down with us and take your medicine. My name is Sadie.
And I'm Jacob.
And today we're going to start with, you guessed it, the trans that are back in the chat. You might recall transgender swimmer Leah Thomas that was in the news recently.
Yes.
Because he is now a she, apparently,
Yeah.
and is crushing everyone on his team and crushing records and things. But recently, a rival team, a Yale swimmer, who is actually a female, but presents as a man, who is not taking hormones, wiped the floor with the other man.
I don't.
Does that follow?
I don't
Does that
understand. I mean,
track?
I understand it, but it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make sense. And I wanted to talk about this because I've heard a lot of people talk about it and they're very confused because they were under the impression that both of the swimmers were taking their respective hormones, but they're not. So
Then neither of them are taking hormones?
just the one is. So Leah Thomas is the only one that was, she is taking estrogen and progesterone or whatever the
Okay.
hormones are.
I
But
see.
Isaac Henning, who is the other one who had his breasts removed,
Wait,
her breasts removed,
why are they competing together?
is not taking testosterone.
They're competing together?
They were competing against each other
Wait, why?
in like the finals because they were both on women's swim teams.
But the one is a trans male.
Yes, but she said it was justified through the NCAA because she's not taking hormones. And the other one is justified because she's taking hormones.
This is so dumb.
A little bit of mind
Oh my
whatever
goodness.
for you. So
Yeah, so
basically,
this is the headline.
this is the headline. Yale trans swimmer beats Penn trans rival in women's Ivy League race. And everyone was going, huh? And so everyone thought it was like two men that became women or
yeah.
presented as women swimming against
So
each
this
other.
is
But
the part.
they're not.
This is the part where like, so that the I guess if I'm going to be critical of the right wing narrative falls apart in this case
Yes.
a little bit because the narrative is that, oh well, biological males are always going to outcompete women, which is generally true. But then you have a biological woman who beats the biological male.
Yeah, which
but
is a little bit like, wow, a woman can beat a man, but that's like the one outlier. Like you found the
Right.
one outlier.
But the part that I don't understand is I was under the impression that the Leah Thomas was absolutely crushing like everyone by huge margins. And so then to have a biological woman come and beat that person,
That's an incredible swimmer.
yeah, that's like, yeah, I don't have words for that.
Yeah.
like, the world has become so just drowning in clown pills and clown
Yeah.
serum that I just
Yes.
can't. I literally cannot wrap my head around this at all.
Right. And I wanted to talk about this because I know a lot of people on the right have a really difficult time swallowing and understanding any issue surrounding trans people. But because I went to a very liberal college, I kind of understand it better just because I've had it explained to me 1,000,001 times and to a point where I can actually understand it. So I wanted to kind of clarify it because everyone's like, huh? What? I'm so confused. So just to give you a basis, according to Outkick, Thomas, who is the biological male, won the 200 meter and 500 meter races at Penn's final home meet of the season. And that was the meet that sparked a lot of controversy because of the huge, like 30-second margin of completion that Thomas had over the second fastest swimmer.
Yeah.
And then they say, but she finished 6th in the 100 meter to Yale's own Isaac Hennig, who is the biological female. And she crushed the male. And Hennig finished the 100 meter race in 49.57 seconds.
Yeah. I think that has to
I
be
think
seconds.
it's seconds. And Thomas's was 52.84 seconds. So it's a pretty good amount of time.
Is Hennig like doping or something? Because
No.
like how? Yeah, I mean, okay. So Isaac Hennig must just be a phenomenal swimmer.
Yes.
Because that portion just said like, yeah, Thomas was or maybe it wasn't that portion, but Thomas was crushing all kinds
Yes.
of competitions and coming in first place. And
So that's the thing. So if Isaac was taking testosterone, that would be basically the equivalent of doping, according to NCAA guidelines for women's sports, because testosterone, as we all know, is an incredible hormone and can make you do some crazy things. And even men will take testosterone just to get beefier.
Yeah.
And not even steroids. Like, they'll just take testosterone and it helps them gain muscle and whatever. So
I mean, I guess if I'm being fair to, it could be the case that Leah Thomas is just not a great swimmer, period.
Well, I think that was part of it. And that's why, if we're speculating, that's why he decided he was a woman, so that he could compete and like crush, because we've seen this narrative of like men transing to women and then crushing sports, transing to women and then crushing their respective sport.
Yeah.
And so there was a little bit of speculation that that's something that Thomas had done. Thomas had did, because apparently he wasn't very good on the men's team. Like, he was like the biggest loser on the men's team.
I mean, I would be hesitant to say like that was the sole motivation, but like part of me is like, it's just suspicion arousing to transition and then still compete in top level sports. Like, just make a sacrifice. Like, if you're gonna transition, like, put some things aside, let the competition stay fair. But you're like, Leah Thomas is obviously very happily taking advantage of the fact that he's a biological male. So it's like,
that's always been my biggest thing, because everyone's like, well, why can't trans people compete? It's like, wouldn't you feel guilt as a person who's trans competing when you know that it's an unfair advantage?
Right.
But I guess they don't, because they're so egotistical that it's like all me, me, and that's why they changed their gender to begin with. But it's like, if you're doing something that drastic, why wouldn't you take a step back and go, it's probably not fair if I continue to compete because of the choices that I'm making?
Right. Yeah, no one wants to discriminate against trans people. It's just like well, I guess you could say discrimination becomes necessary when your involvement in something is going to unfairly impact others.
Yeah.
And so like you're literally a biological male taking away women's records, which is erasing, like, that's the whole reason why we have women's categories in sports, is because they cannot compete with biological males at the same level. That's the reason why they're segregated into their own area. And so to have biological males coming back into that, it's like, you can be trans. I have absolutely no problem with that. You can live your life as you want. But when your choice starts impacting unfairly women who have, in some cases, worked their entire young adult lives becoming good swimmers and good athletes, and then they just get crushed by biological male, that feels so deeply wrong to me. And it should feel deeply wrong to anyone that has any sense of conscience, I think. You know?
So now that you say that, if we can go on to the part 2 of this.
Okay.
So there was a follow-up recently about Leah Thomas, who recently lost to the Yale Isaac Hennig. The headline of this story is Transgender Penn Swimmer Breaks Team Rules, Compares Self to Jackie Robinson.
Wow.
Can you believe the audacity?
I cannot believe the audacity.
So the very first thing that this article says, and this was in the Washington Examiner, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, it was the Washington Examiner, I believe.
This first part says, in the second part of an exclusive interview with a female swimmer on the University of Pennsylvania's swimming team, one of the swimmers describes the toxic environment that surrounds the women this year. So this person decided to remain anonymous for their career,
yeah,
obviously.
because you'll be kicked out of college if you say anything against trans people.
Yeah, kicked out of an Ivy League school, lose your scholarships at the least. Accusations of entitlement, selfishness, and a general disregard for overall performance have plagued the team since Leah Thomas, a biologic male, started swimming on their team. So that's pretty much what we were talking about.
Right.
The egotistical, narcissistic, selfish tendencies. So this person is quoted as saying, I try not to be around her because the whole situation makes me so mad. This swimmer said, I don't think Leah is a bad person. She's very quiet and kind of introverted. It's just really hard for me to respect her at all because of what she's doing to my team and what she's doing to women in general and not caring. So that's coming straight from somebody from the
Yeah.
team. She asserted that Thomas evinces a lack of sincerity and empathy towards teammates.
I mean, yeah, that makes sense because to be the kind of person that's again going to be a biological male and compete in women's sports, you have to lack empathy. You have to sort of like be lying to yourself and be so self-centered that you don't care about how your actions are impacting others. It's like, yeah. And then, of course, you have Isaac Hennig, who is a biological female and still competes in the female. So why didn't this Leah Thomas dude go and stay in the male league? Like, you can be trans and not be on hormones and compete, or don't compete at all. Like, those should be your options. But yeah, to go, this makes me so mad.
Yeah,
like,
I almost have more respect for Isaac, even though it's really upsetting that she had a double mastectomy voluntarily. I have more respect for her because she is waiting to start hormone therapy until she's out of college and done with the sport so that she can still compete at the same level as all of her colleagues in competition. So I have more respect. I don't agree with her decisions, but I respect it more than Leah Thomas's.
Right, because there's no unfair advantage being imparted.
Right.
And even if Isaac Hennig did take testosterone and move to the men's league, that's not a problem compared to a man going to a women's league. It's just like, if you take testosterone and you're a biological female and you're competing in the men's league, I don't know if that's really going to put you anywhere near the top.
Probably not, but I mean, if you want to do it, I guess that's fine because you're still technically, you have the same advantages or disadvantages, I guess, with the testosterone. But so the swimmer goes on to say she laughs about it and mocks the situation. Instead of caring or showing that she cares about what she's doing or what she's doing to her teammates, she's not sympathetic or empathetic at all. Leah never addressed our team. She never asked if it was okay. She never asked how we felt. She never tried to explain how she feels. She never has said anything to us as a group. She never addressed anything.
That's interesting. So I don't know how to feel about that. I think if I read into it a lot and I put on my mind reading capabilities because I have them, this sounds to me like somebody who knows what they're doing is wrong and they're just trying to hide it under the rug. Like,
well, they probably feel uncomfortable about it too.
Yeah, it might be discomfort, but I think it might be, they don't want to address it because addressing it would bring it out into the open and reveal it to be something that's not appropriate.
Right.
And so by just ignoring it, ignoring the elephant in the room, so to speak, you kind of don't have to address it, right? Which is not the way to live your life properly.
Right.
But I wonder if that's sort of what's going on here,
I mean, it's a real problem, though, if you are performing on some kind of team. If you know that there's a problem and you're not addressing it, then it's almost like you don't even actually want to be part of that team.
Right.
And it does really ruin team dynamics and it ruins morale. And overall, your team is going to perform poorly or not as well as they would have if the morale had been higher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
that's true.
It really is. It takes a toll on a team when one person is causing a lot of havoc.
Yeah, the selfishness and narcissism it's beyond you, not just because you're unfairly competing, but also because it's dragging, like you said, it's dragging the morale down. So you want to read this next section?
Yeah, I do want to read everything that this swimmer was quoted as saying, just because her words, I think, are more powerful than anything anyone else can say about it. So she goes on to say, on our last training trip, we were told not to wear pen gear on our trip to Florida, on the off chance that we would get harassed or anything. So everyone went out of their way. Now about 75% of our athletic wardrobe is pen. We went out of our way to not pack any pen stuff, except Leah. Every single day at the airport and at the gym, Leah made sure to wear a big pen shirt with pen, swim, and dive on it. And she was the only one. We weren't allowed to wear it because of her, and she did it every day.
That's unacceptable. Yeah, I don't know how anyone... Like, it just, every section keeps getting worse, and I'm trying not to get to the point where I'm just like, fuck this person, but I'm pretty much at that point now, like, fuck this person. Like,
well, it's so obvious that this person has no integrity at all.
Yeah.
You have no integrity, because if you did, you would at least say, like, I am not here to cause a scene, or even if that's not true, like you would address it in some way and you would try to respect the rules set by your coach, especially if you're the reason that the rules are set. Like you would almost expect somebody to go out of their way to make sure that they are following those specific rules. That they are the reason of.
Well, any normal person would notice, oh, I'm doing something that the rest of the team is not doing, and immediately feel bad about it, regardless of what it is. It could be something so minor, something that wasn't even related to you, something that you never even heard of until you saw everyone doing something. And you'd be like, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. You know what I mean? So, like, it's very obviously intentional. This person is, flexing their muscle, so to speak, his muscle.
Well, it seems like he's harboring a lot of ill will to his teammates, or flaunting some kind of privilege that he knows that he has. And that is the really upsetting part.
And that's sort of the really sinister thing about this whole left-wing ideology of tolerance, acceptance, inclusion. It's like you're giving people who claim some sort of minority status unlimited power to do whatever they want. If you are transgender, you're unassailable. There is nothing that you can do is wrong. Your character doesn't matter.
Right.
All that matters is that you're trans. If you're a person of color, your character doesn't matter. It's like, it's a total reversal of the entire ethos behind civil rights, which is that character is the only thing that matters and merit's the only thing that matters. Now, it's like, I highly doubt that I could get a job in big tech anywhere on the simple basis that I'm a white male. That's not good.
You'd be at the bottom of the list.
Yeah, exactly. That's not good.
A straight white male.
And I don't have any evidence to support that claim, but I know it's true. And imagine the rest of the country feeling this way about everything.
Yeah.
Imagine that, how sinister it is that when you see a trans person or when you see a minority person, that people are going to have that little tiny seed in the back of their mind, that little question, that little doubt. Is that person here because they have the merit to do the job, or do they get here because of their immutable characteristics? And that's that is a terrible thought to have, but it's you are creating the environment where that becomes the norm.
Well, and it's funny that you say that, because I was at a craft store the other day, shocker, and
very surprising.
There was a black woman there who had her cart like super in the way in the aisle, and it wasn't a very big aisle. And I had my cart, and I was like trying to get around her, and she just looked at me, didn't move her cart, nothing. And I was like, do I try to squeeze around her, or do I just take the long way around the aisle and go around, because I don't want to start anything?
Right.
Because in the back of my mind, I'm like, if I ask her to move politely, is she going to start screaming at me and calling me a white supremacist and say things like, I'm allowed to be here, I can take up this space? You know, it was like, I don't know what to do.
Right.
And she was like, so her cart was over here, and she was over here looking at something, and she was taking her sweet time, and I'm standing there, and I'm like, don't say anything, because you might inadvertently cause a scene, because you're a white lady and you're going to get called a Karen just because you're trying to get around like we used to be able to do in a civilized society.
Right.
You know, so it's funny that you say that, because that, I'm like, am I a racist now? Because that little thing is passing through my mind. Like, if I see a black lady, she's going to freak out at me and call me a Karen just because I'm trying to live my life.
People are literally becoming afraid to treat trans people, gay people, black people, any minority at all.
Fat people.
People are afraid to treat them like they would treat everyone else, precisely because this empowerment of minorities, for lack of a better word, it's not really empowerment. It's like subversion of the cultural order. But it's like, I don't want to have those thoughts. And no one in their right mind wants to have...
I felt bad about it. I really felt bad about it.
But this is the inevitable consequence of doing things like this, of making people that claim any minority status unassailable from any direction. Yeah. You can't say... We're gonna
but we have the privilege as the straight white people.
Right. We're most definitely transphobes for talking about this issue. So it's like,
apparently I'm a racist too. But
if future employers see this, I might just have to get on some of that government money.
Yeah. So the very last line of this article was really upsetting. The swimmer who is not named, said, "It's been super draining and frustrating because no one seems to care about the actual women."
Yeah, this anonymous swimmer is definitely a transphobe. I cannot believe that
I
she's
know,
saying these
cancel
things.
her immediately.
We need to get the entirety of CNN's investigative group, AP. They need to go after and
Where's
find out who said
Reuters?
this. Yeah, we need to find out who said this. We need to make sure that they never occupy any position in
Yeah.
higher education ever again.
No, I'm really glad that, what is this, the Washington Examiner?
Yeah.
I'm glad that they let her speak anonymously, because I don't think we would have heard any of this
Right.
had they not. And I'm sure she was still scared to give this interview because somebody's going to try to track her down. But
Yeah. I mean, you don't know how these journalists, I mean, Washington Examiner is a right-wing
Yes.
outlet, so
Yeah.
I think they're probably going to protect their sources, but at the same time, it's like,
there's a lot of
pretty
internet
brave.
sleuths, though.
Even if you're anonymous, that's pretty brave.
Because anybody can get on the internet, look up the entirety of the UPenn swim team for 2020 or 2021. It says she's 2021 probably, assuming she stayed on the team the whole year.
Yeah.
All they have to do is look up the roster and start digging into literally every single person's social media. I mean, the internet sleuths that got a lot of time on their hands, they will find out and try to destroy her.
Yeah.
If they can.
Yeah, it's
So as long as she was careful on the rest of her social media about what she said and what she posts,
yeah.
I think she'll be okay. But
Well, kudos to her, but
I know.
yeah,
I'm really upset
that's
for her,
risky.
though. I'm also just upset for her because this is something that she is doing in college, presumably because she loves it and loves her team, and it's all being taken away from her. She might be on a scholarship too, so it's like you have to do this thing to get the money, and it's becoming a miserable experience for you. And she's absolutely right. Nobody cares about the actual women. And a lot of people on the right have made the mistake of saying it's about women's sports, but it's not about women's sports. It's just about women having women's spaces, women only spaces. Just like men having men only spaces. It's like we have to stop erasing these things.
Right.
Men and women deserve to have their own respective spaces.
Right. And I understand that there's going to be difficulty on behalf of trans individuals because where do they fit, right?
Right.
But it's like that's a problem that you have to work out, and that doesn't mean that there's going to be anything that declares itself as a women's space is automatically going to be exclusionary to trans people. You can have women's spaces that are also welcoming of trans women,
Right.
and male spaces that are also welcoming of trans men. But it's like
Sports is not that place,
right?
though.
And you can't demand that every single women's space be accommodating to trans.
Right.
Like it's just not. It's not appropriate. It's not fair in a lot of instances.
Well, and it doesn't make any sense because if you're deciding that you're going to make this big life change, that you don't like your gender and you want to change it, how is this not something that you consider, especially if you're an athlete?
Right.
How does that not make it on your pro and con list?
Because you
It's
can have
just
it
an
all.
afterthought? Is that
Because
just an afterthought?
The current cultural moment is that you can have it all. If
But
you're
that's the
trans,
selfishness
you can, right?
of it.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it's a mess. We have a lot of issues to work through in this,
We do.
moment. And the thing that actually irks me a lot too about this left-wingism in the United States, the rainbow agenda, is that this is being exported to other countries too. Like countries that
Well-
would have never thought, like the UK is like adopting this language of, Black Lives Matter. It's like they don't have the same racial history.
No, they don't have a racism problem like we do.
The UK is like what, over 90% white people. You have places like Norway, which is like 98% white people, and you're hearing you're starting to hear this like left wing agenda from the United States coming out of these places. It's like, what are you even doing? Like, Black Lives Matter makes sense in the context of the United States. I can understand why certain people would have these deranged ideas about race relations because we have a history of rockiness there, to say the least. But these other places that have been white for their entire history are like, Black Lives Matter.
I mean,
it's like,
I
what
guess
are you
it
talking
makes
about?
sense for the UK because they were involved in slave trade also.
True, I
with
guess
their
so.
British East Indies companies and things like that. But they abolished slavery
well before the United States.
like a long time ago. Like, I think they were done selling to us and they were like, okay.
And you can't make the argument, I don't think you can make this argument in the United States very strongly either, but you certainly can't make the argument that slaves built the UK.
No.
No, white people built the UK.
Well, because white people built the UK and then later discovered black people. Like, like a long time later when they started discovering new places. So
right, true.
they had white slaves in the UK
Yeah.
but white people still built the UK. So
Yeah,
it doesn't make any sense. I know that the UK is big on like the trans and gay ideology too.
Yeah,
and
that makes more sense. But part
critical
of me is
gender
like,
theory, but
would that critical gender theory, like you said, have arisen without left-wing intellectuals in the United States pushing their BS? Like, I generally have more respect for the
well,
higher institutions of like the UK, like
yeah.
their colleges and their universities, because they seem to be more focused on the things that matter when they're talking about like human studies. They're actually talking about rich discussion of the philosophies and the history that underpins Western society. And the United States is just a joke compared to that. But it's starting to,
True.
I think the joke is starting to seep into the rest of the world.
Well, and that's probably just because we have so much cultural and political power and influence.
Yeah.
And also even our population numbers are staggering compared to most westernized European nations. So it makes sense that, all those other cultures would be downstream from ours, but it is a little ridiculous that these well-established, very old countries are taking a page out of our book when we are clearly not doing well.
Right.
Like, oh, America's falling apart. Why don't we adopt their crazy ass ideas? Maybe we'll do it right. It's like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that blows my mind.
But
anyway,
I mean, if Britain wants to ruin themselves too,
go right ahead. Should we talk about fact checks? So this article is from, I've never heard of this before. I saw this on Twitter, but it's the Africa Fact Check, which I didn't look into their background a lot. I just mostly wanted to address this open letter to YouTube's CEO from the world's fact checkers. So already the red flag should be flagging up.
Well, I don't know. I'm going to go into it with an open mind because if it's a letter to YouTube CEO, I'm going to go into it with an open mind, although I'm probably going to be severely disappointed.
Yeah, so I pulled out a couple excerpts from this article. So one of the intro paragraphs that is laying out the case for why YouTube needs to take a stronger stance in favor of fact-checking is, so this passage says, in Brazil, the platform has been used to amplify hate speech against vulnerable groups. There's your left-wing from the Africa Fact Check.
I'm disappointed already.
Reaching tens of thousands of users. Elections are not safe either. In the Philippines, false content with over 2 million views denying human rights abuses and corruption during the martial law years are being used to burnish the reputation of the late dictator's son, one of the candidates in the 2022 elections. So here we already have, they link to it, but they just come out and say that it's false content. They could be right. I didn't look into it, but they're making very strong statements about to use it as a framework to build up to their argument that YouTube needs to add fact-checking and basically censorship. So they just come out and saying, like, yeah, they're false content, deliberately false content, no equivocation. It's just false. Got viewed 2 million times.
Yeah.
Might be true. I don't know. Let's keep going. In Taiwan, the last election was marred by unsubstantiated accusations of fraud. There you go again. They're just saying unsubstantiated. The whole world witnessed the consequences of disinformation when a violent mob assaulted the U.S. Capitol. From the eve of the U.S. presidential election to the day after, YouTube videos supporting the fraud narrative were watched more than 33 million times.
The worst day in U.S. history.
The worst day. And
why does Taiwan care about that? Oh, no. The whole world. Why does the whole world care about what happened to our capital? Or didn't happen to our capital?
It goes back to what you said, but I think it's primarily because YouTube is an American company.
Okay.
And so when they bring up...
But what is the difference? Let me ask you this. What's the difference between an unsubstantiated accusation and an opinion?
Who's fact-checking it?
Okay.
That's the difference. So this is why fact-checking is another one of those sinister terms. Because
so gross.
This is exactly why we don't have speech panels. This is exactly why we don't have a ministry of truth. Because no one can be trusted to be the arbiter of truth. But that's exactly what fact-checkers are proposing or purporting to do. Is they're saying we and we alone are the only ones capable of objective, unbiased examination of a claim that we can determine to be factual or not factual. That is their entire claim, and they're wrong more often than not.
Well, I also, sorry to interrupt you, but I also heard somebody recently say that with all of these new fact checkers coming onto the scene, we can't have satire anymore. People can't understand sarcasm or have satire because if you say something wrong, even if it's wrong on its face, if you're doing it in parody or in satire, it's meant to be purposefully false.
Right.
Because it's supposed to make you laugh.
Well, that's
whatever.
the danger of transcripts too. Like they'll take a transcript out of a video and then fact check it, but it's like you don't have the intonation, you don't have whether the person said it with a big smile on their face, or they'll even cut out entire content. Like they won't mention that maybe this person couldn't hold it together when they were laughing so much about saying it.
Yeah,
like they'll
true.
just write it out. You might say something ridiculous like trans people are wombats, and
good.
but in the transcript it'll look like this: trans people are wombats. Like there's no
fact check false.
It's like there's no context about how it was said, where it was said, what audience was it said in front of. They don't mention any of that. They just straight up fact check the literal words.
Yeah.
They're literally autists. Yep. They cannot.
Well, what's their new thing too? They'll like fact check something and then it's like missing context, and it's like, that's not a fact check.
Right.
If you're missing context, go find some context. Like it's not the poster's fault that you don't have the context for what they're posting, because maybe they're posting a follow-up to something they did like 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So if you don't have the context, do your damn research before you slap a fact check on there.
Yeah, it's like
or don't do it at all. Like why are we checking people's speech?
You can't relay a fact without all of the context that supports that fact. It's like, what are you talking about? Do I have to like read the entire encyclopedia in order to get to the fact that the Earth is spherical? Like
it's flat, actually.
Okay. All right.
Get your facts right.
Oh yeah, whatever. But I actually, so this last link in this little excerpt here that claims about YouTube videos supporting the fraud narrative watched more than 33 million times, I did click into that one. And one of the videos they cited was Tim Pool. And in that video of Tim Pool's, he was talking about the actual legal challenges that were being made against against the electoral count. So he was
like
literally
the legal counsel's words or whatever.
Yeah,
that
he was literally
about?
reporting on the cases that were going to be brought before a court, like the actual legal proceedings, and they labeled that as support of the fraud narrative.
That is ridiculous.
Yeah,
that's ridiculous.
It's totally So anyway,
that's making my eye twitch. Actually, my eye is twitching right now.
So the next section. This is again addressed to the YouTube CEO. It says, your company platform has so far framed discussions about disinformation as a false dichotomy of deleting or not deleting content. By doing this, YouTube is avoiding the possibility of doing what has been proven to work. Our experience as fact checkers, together with academic evidence, tells us that surfacing fact check information is more effective than deleting content. So, in other words, providing our own propaganda over a video under the guise of a fact check is far more, good for our narrative than deleting the content, because then we can't counter propagandize it. That's essentially what they're saying, is it not?
Yeah, but it's so frustrating because it's like you either get a fact check or we're just going to delete your content. It's like, it's so infuriating.
It's like they're so I'm going to read this next section and then give another thought here. So this goes on to say, it also preserves freedom of expression while acknowledging the need for additional information to mitigate the risks of harm to life, health, safety, and democratic processes. So it looks like the fact checker narrative now, they're starting to pivot towards a new assault on free speech. They realize that deleting content has just driven people to underground services or less used services like Rumble or Parler or Gab or Telegram or whatever. So I think they're noticing that is reducing their ability to counter propagandize people. So now they're opening up a new front in the war against free speech. And they're saying, well, no, we're going to keep the speech up now. We're just going to say this is false and here's all the real information. Because now you're not driving the YouTube people underground. You're not driving the viewership underground, right? They're still on the platform. They can go to a video that the fact checkers think is false, and then they can be propagandized and brainwashed right there in their YouTube video.
Yeah, but if it's somebody that is viewing it that was inclined to go to another platform to begin with, they're not going to read that stuff. Or they might just to be like, what is this?
Right.
But they're not going to believe it. So,
I mean, I didn't say their analysis was accurate.
But I mean, it makes sense that they're doing that because they don't want to lose viewership. They don't want to lose users, right? Because that doesn't look good for your brand.
Right.
But
the
reality,
fact checkers
who's gonna-
don't want to lose they have a captive audience. If
Yeah.
YouTube just surfaces fact check from like Africa Fact Check or AP or whatever,
Yeah.
That's a captive audience. You're gonna get your
Right.
fact check exposed to more and more people, which is really just like a propaganda tool, you know.
It's all propaganda.
Yeah. It's absolutely ridiculous.
I mean, I guess propaganda isn't technically against free speech, but labeling other speech as propaganda for the sake of having it censored is.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like if you were really concerned about the preservation of free speech, you wouldn't be advocating for YouTube to allow you to put quote unquote fact checks over top of videos. You would just release your own video response. And of course, that wouldn't get as much traction because your content's not that interesting.
Well, it's been a really, not so much a slippery slope, but we've seen this decline, right? Because YouTube started these propaganda tactics, I guess, by first like shadow banning people and making sure that videos that were similar wouldn't come up if they were against the political narrative. You know, it would be like whatever political video you were watching, and if it didn't agree with the narrative being pushed, they would then recommend you a video that did push the narrative right after that, instead of one that was more similar to the one you had just watched, which was the old school model and is still the model for like, I don't know, like if you're fixing a tractor or whatever, like it still will do it for that, or like fashion videos, it still does it for that. But if it's political, they try to change your direction of where you're looking. And now it's become, you get labels slapped on it, or you get a warning and they won't let you publish it until you take out like a certain sentence. And now it's, we just want to put an entire fact check list essentially on your video. And maybe it's going to even get to a point where they want to insert a clip of some YouTube employee saying, here's the actual fact. Like they just want to put it directly into your video. Yeah. I could see them doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And one other thing I wanted to say about this particular excerpt here too is that there's this term academic evidence again showing up. I think we talked about this a few episodes ago, where it's like, oh, you needed academic evidence that negative punishment works to coerce people to do stuff.
Right.
It's like, if you're brainwashing people, of course it's going to work. If you're bombarding them with the information that you want them to see day in and day out, of course that's going to work.
Well, and the real problem with academic evidence is that it's so easy to cherry pick. Like statistics are the easiest thing to manipulate to make them appear exactly how you want them to appear. And also in academia, there are a lot of experts or whatever, doctors, whatever you want to call them, that really have contradicting beliefs, especially in these more gray area, like soft sciences. It's not hard facts. It's all observation and inference about human behavior and like psychologic states. So you're going to have a lot of experts disagreeing with each other. So it's very easy to cherry pick from the experts that you agree with.
Right.
So just because you say it was academic evidence, it's like, well, who is it coming from? What's their whole shtick?
Right.
What are they constantly studying? What's the narrative they're trying to push? Because in the soft sciences, it often is that they're trying to push a certain narrative, and it's not so much they just want to observe behavior and then publish what they observed. There's always an ulterior motive to observing that behavior.
And even if you're trying to be a straightforward and honest researcher, the design of an experiment can totally just mangle your results from reality, right? Like they could introduce unintended bias into the sampling. You know, people are very impressionable. So like you can pretty much get them to do anything that you want with the design of the experiment. Even when you're trying to be as objective as possible, you're still going to introduce some sort of bias that's going to probably factor in.
It's really difficult to perform any kind of behavioral or psychological studies because of that.
And this is why, like, I feel like anyone who is even remotely, like, has even a little bit of social skills can pretty much come to the conclusions that these social sciences have come to about people. Like, yeah, if you punish people or threaten them with punishment, they're going to do what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you bombard them with the information that you want them to see, they're more likely to believe it. Like these are obvious to anyone that has lived longer than like, I don't know, 15 years on this planet.
Right.
So it's like
it's just things you learn being a human interacting with other
right.
people.
And this is why we're saying it's wrong, because you are literally advocating for the ability to bombard people with only the information that you want them to see.
Yeah.
To counter a narrative that you don't like. And of course that's going to work. Of course that's going to work. That's why we're fighting it.
Right.
We don't want it to work. That's the point.
It's going to work on the people that we've seen other propaganda work on already, but
right.
But there's not enough people that it doesn't work on for it to be okay for them to implement it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So this is the last expert I have. They basically had a list of requests for YouTube, but this is point number 2. In the requests, it says, beyond removing content for legal compliance, YouTube's focus should be on providing context and offering debunks, clearly superimposed on videos or as additional video content. That only can come from entering into a meaningful and structured collaboration, taking the responsibility and systematically investigating in independent fact-checking efforts around the world.
Hey, isn't that what I just predicted that they would do? I didn't know about this, folks.
Yeah.
I just guessed. I read into their minds. So they do want to impose in your video
and they want
their own.
They don't just
shit.
want context, which can be whatever they want it to be, because of everything you do every day is missing some context.
Of course.
But they want to directly offer debunks.
Yep.
Debunks, which is counter narrative. It's counter programming.
Yeah, it's like what you're debunking something that you just don't agree with.
Right.
Like you can quite literally debunk anything.
Right. You can debunk even the most hardened statistics.
Yes. Well, again, it's the problem with statistics. So you can make a statistic look exactly how you want it in any scenario. And that includes in a scenario where you're trying to debunk it. And also using that word makes it seem like everything that goes against the narrative is a conspiracy theory.
Mm-hmm.
We have to debunk and disprove this conspiracy theory because we don't agree with it. But it's
Right.
like, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's an opinion.
Yeah, there's that that meme with like the soy boy drawing, and he's like,
Yeah.
debunked. That's exactly like every time. It's like, I wish this wasn't the case, but the word debunked and academics and experts, those words have been totally soured for me. Like if you use those words in a sentence, I'm like, get out of my life. don't be saying no debunking around me.
But there's just so many words that have absolutely no meaning anymore in our culture that thinking back on it would have meant something. Like even in the past 2 years, it's just like the word quarantine used to mean something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh shit, like you got radiation poisoning or you got something really bad. You got Ebola or Zika or something. You got something real nasty.
You got stick it to the maniosis.
Yeah. And now it's like, ugh. If I hear another person say they quarantined, I'm going to karate chop them in the throat.
Yeah.
Just so I don't have to hear them speak for a few minutes.
That's absolutely absurd.
That's
well,
upsetting.
Should we talk about something else that's absurd? Voting rights?
Ugh, yeah. We can talk about that.
So this is the headline.
Yep. So this was breaking 2 days ago, January 13th. House passes federal voting rights laws. Bill heads to the Senate. So a sweeping bill to overhaul states' voting laws and bring them under federal control has been passed by the House and is now on its way to the Senate, where Majority Leader Chuck Schumer will attempt to bypass the Republicans' filibuster. On Thursday, so this would have been this past Thursday.
Yeah.
2 days ago. On Thursday, the package passed the House of Representatives along party lines by a vote of 220 to 203.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that now we know that Kyrsten Sinema has come out strongly against eliminating the filibuster.
Yes, I was actually very shocked by that. She's not against the voting rights per se, but she doesn't want to nix the filibuster.
Yeah.
Which I think is a smart move.
I want to talk about voting rights more deeply as we go into this, but I also want to stop and dwell on this filibuster thing for a little bit and the political strategy and what might be going on behind the scenes there, because we know of Kyrsten Sinema and Senator Joe Manchin, their very strong nose against the filibuster, and everyone, at least on the left, is blaming them for wanting to destroy democracy and letting the insurrectionists win and all this unhinged garbage. But what is noticeably absent is moderate Democrats in the Senate coming out in favor or against the filibuster.
Yeah.
And so what I think is happening here, this is my hunch, is that since Manchin's in a safe red state, and since Kyrsten Sinema is like basically safe moderate, like Arizona can go either way. It's a purple state, so it can go either red or blue. They are in the strongest positions to be against eliminating the filibuster, which means that they can cover the asses of all of the moderate Democrats that don't want to vote on the issue, right? So there's a lot of Democrats that are absolutely silent on this issue, and I think it's because they simply do not want to be on record as either supporting or being against eliminating the filibuster. So
makes sense.
So I think, maybe Kyrsten Sinema's backbone is stiffened by the fact that there's 5 other Senate Democrats that are telling her, please, like, do this for me, do me a favor. I do not want this to happen. I don't want to be on record. So because it is kind of weird to have just 2 Democrats standing up against their entire party. Maybe not in the case of Manchin because he's in a deep red state, and so he's basically a Republican. But in the case of like Kyrsten Sinema, I would expect her to be a little bit more floppy if 49 other Democrat senators are like, we need you to do this. But I think that there's more Democrats behind the scenes that are like, please don't make us vote on this. Please protect us.
So they're basically the sacrifices
Right.
of the party.
Right, exactly.
Which makes sense because it's like not everyone needs to lose their career over it. And if these 2 have already been very vocal about it, yeah, it makes sense. There was somebody, I heard a quote from somebody recently that fit into this, and now I can't remember. So maybe it'll come back as we keep talking about this. But I have a pretty strong respect for Manchin just because he actually seems to care about what his constituency wants, because he said multiple times, like, I will not vote on anything that I cannot explain to my constituents. And that is very admirable. And even though he is a Democrat and, plays the Democrat games, he still is like, my home base is mostly Republican. They're not going to understand this. They're not going to agree with it. So I'm not going along with it. So I do have a pretty big respect for him.
I wonder if he's a dino.
Probably. I wouldn't be surprised if he re-ran on a Republican ticket like next time around.
I mean, he just seems to be the last, because like blue collar workers used to be solid Democrats. So
right.
He might just be the last of the blue
Workers'
collar
Party.
Yeah,
right?
he might just be the last of the blue collar Democrats.
He's pretty old, right? He's like in his 60s. Or...
No, he's in his 70s, I'm pretty sure. There's a lot of oldies. There's a lot of old. Well, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of old people in government. We should probably get them all out of there.
I was just talking about this yesterday. It seems like the Republicans are starting to remake the party.
Yes.
You see a lot more young people coming in, a lot more populist people.
Yeah.
All of the promising Senate candidates that I'm seeing are like under 50 years old.
Yeah.
Ron DeSantis is obviously in a very strong position for the 2024 nomination. I think he might even beat Trump, depending on how the base is feeling, because I think the base is not too pleased with Donald Trump lately. So,
well, and Trump just insulted DeSantis the other day too.
That's true.
I think rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
But I think, people, especially after Biden, they're going to be so sick of old people. Donald Trump's going to be super old. All of the promising candidates on the Republican side are young. So it's like, let's remake the party. Let's get some new, fresh thinking into there. Let's get some people
we need something that's going to revitalize our country in spirit and politics.
Right.
And so a young person actually has the energy to do that.
Right. Yeah, I don't want to keep watching an old man hobbling back to the White House from Marine One on the White House lawn.
It's so symbolic of our country, right? It's like, here's an old man close to his deathbed, similar to our country. It's like, we really need some fresh meat.
And compare that to the leaders of our adversaries, too. You have Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. If Vladimir Putin was an American president, I'd be like, that's my president.
Exactly. He's very, he's
a very no-nonsense, tough guy. I mean, he's short.
He's got a lot of vitality, and he's like a real man's man, and he promotes traditional values. I mean, Xi Jinping does too. I mean, they're both very much like traditional family values, nuclear family. They have interesting ways of doing that, but they are both proponents of strong families, young country, vitality.
Yeah, and you compare that to our hobbling old man, the pretty boy up in Canada.
Our country is just on its death rattle.
And then you have Macron, who is directing all of his youthful energy against his own citizens.
Trying to piss off his people.
Yeah. So what are we doing? What are we
Trudeau
doing?
Trudeau is young. He's just a soy boy.
That's what I mean. Yeah, the pretty boy up in.
Oh, yeah. What people have a conspiracy theory that he's Fidel Castro's son.
Oh, yeah. That's ridiculous.
It's not true. I just think it's funny.
Yeah. So anyway, the next section here.
Yeah.
This
Am I
is
reading this?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. As the Daily Mail reports, the Freedom to Vote Act and John Lewis Voting Rights Bill were snuck into an unrelated NASA bill and passed by the House. Sus. Both of these seek to strip states' independence and to control their own laws as concerns voting and would prohibit any state from passing a law that required voters to verify their identity before casting a ballot. So we're back on that stupid voter ID bullshit, which is so insulting to so many people.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. I literally don't know how I would live life without an ID. Can't drive.
It's also not difficult to do.
Right. But it's like you can't drive. You can't buy liquor. You can't buy cigarettes if you do that. You can't buy a house. Can't rent an apartment.
No.
When you buy a house and rent an apartment, they demand more than your ID.
You can't get a job in a lot of cases without an ID.
True.
And you can't get insurance.
Yeah, what about taxes?
You can't pay your taxes. I mean, they are so clearly saying that they want non-taxpayers to vote by saying, get rid of voter ID requirements. It's like,
but it's
what?
like, think about the person that can live life without an ID at all. Is that a person that you want voting anyway?
Yeah, it's like a homeless guy.
A person that doesn't pay taxes, probably doesn't have a house or apartment, or at least not one that required income and an ID, has never driven a car, like, doesn't have a utility bill. Like, what do you... that's the person you want voting, is the person who literally can't do anything in life? Okay, I will acknowledge maybe there's a handful of people out there that can't vote because they don't have an ID. How about they get their life together first before they start voting for people that control my life? Like, it is the bare minimum to get an ID. And look, if you legitimately cannot afford the $25 fee or whatever it is to get an ID, I have no problem with the taxpayers paying to get you an ID.
Is there not some kind of
I'm
system
sure there
for that
is.
already? Like, if you're on welfare, can't you get certain like write-offs for...
I ain't never been on welfare, but
I feel like that's something that would be taken care of.
Yeah.
Like, if you were on welfare and you couldn't afford $25 or whatever it is in your state for an ID, I feel like that's probably covered somewhere in there.
Well, it should be, right? Because you need an ID to do so many things. It's like, if you legitimately
you need an ID
can't
to be
afford
on
it,
welfare, so I mean...
there you go.
That's the thing, right? They're trying to say that all of these people who are poor or, you know, less fortunate or whatever can't vote because they don't have an ID. But how did they get on government programs without an ID or without a social security number or something? Like, you have something,
right?
Like, bring your birth certificate, bring your social security card, bring your ID. Like, if you don't have an ID, you have a birth certificate or a social security number or both. Like, I don't know why it's so hard,
right,
to bring something to the voting booth to be like, this is who I am.
Yeah, and if they were really concerned about the ID issue, like, I could understand, I wouldn't support, but I could understand a bill that would just provide free IDs to everyone. But they're trying to eliminate the requirement for voting. So it's like their intentions are very obviously clear here. They want people who are otherwise not qualified to vote to be able to vote because it benefits them.
AKA illegal immigrants.
True.
But because they're pretty much the only people in this country that can't get IDs and don't have IDs.
Right, because they're illegal.
I love watching the videos of people going around asking, you know, like, black people how hard it is to get an ID, because that's who they're trying to make this out to be. It's like, well, some black people can't get identification because it's too difficult or whatever, and black people are like, I have my ID right here. My DMV's like down the block. Like, I know exactly where it is. It's in my wallet. I've never not known anybody to not have an ID. They're like, what kind of question is this?
Like, everyone has a government issued ID from the time they're 15 when they first start driving?
Yeah, pretty much.
So I knew some kids that had IDs before then. Like,
yeah, you could get like kid identification cards. Right. So like, if they got lost or whatever, police would know where the kid lived.
Or I think there was some, like, you know, if you wanted to get a library card or something, you needed to have like a state issued ID or something. I don't know, but yeah, I even knew some kids who were like 13 and had government issued IDs. Yeah. It wasn't a driver's license. It was just like a state
identification
ID.
card. Yeah. Well, and some people have them too because they have medical medical things, like if they pass out,
Oh,
like
yeah.
the
And it has the health.
paramedics have to see what's what. So it also has like your name and your birth date and
It has
it has everything about you that they need to know, including your medical information.
Yeah, it has the organ donor, so they can cut you open right there if they need to.
Exactly. They take your eyeballs right out while you're passed out.
Ship them to China.
Anyway, so this is pretty much the entirety of the article. It was really short because it was a breaking story, but I'm just going to read through all of it, or we'll pause, I'm sure. But
okay.
Senator Schumer's plan is to have the bill sent to the Senate as a, quote, message, which will allow him to skip the 60-vote threshold needed to start the debate on the voting rights material. This bill's
What? That's not...
Wait, what?
This bill comes is
there
what
we
it's
go.
supposed to say.
This bill comes as dozens of states have passed their own voting integrity laws, many of which increase early voting. I love that they call it voter integrity law.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of propaganda going on both sides. Voting rights is obviously just purely a propaganda name because they're just trying to make it easier for Democrats to win elections.
Correct.
But if I'm being fair, the voter integrity laws are also a little bit of a propaganda. It is tightening up the election rules, and you could say that's integrity, but it's obviously not like stop people from voting law. Like it's, you know,
I know.
they are introducing election integrity, and I agree with a lot of the measures, but calling it voter integrity laws is also a form
It's very sketchy.
A form of propagandizing. But
I mean, everybody's spitting out their own propaganda in their own way.
Yeah, that's just politics. I mean, you have to. Half of it is what words you use, what you call it. I mean, Andrew Yang had the freedom dividend.
Yes.
He did a study that said that the support for universal basic income went up like substantially when he called it a freedom dividend, like just by changing the words. So it's like, you know, words do matter, but we have to keep that in mind. Like the bills that are being passed are more than just their titles. So
right. Well, and it's tricky that they passed it in a NASA bill.
Well, the reason they're doing that is because they knew it wouldn't pass and knew no Republicans will vote for it. And so now the Republicans are on record as being anti-science and anti-NASA, even though that's not why they voted no.
That's ridiculous.
Politics is so dirty.
They're like, we got you. It's like, what are you, 5?
Right.
That's
well,
so stupid.
Some Democrat that's running for re-election is going to be like, the Republicans are as anti-science as ever. They just recently voted down a NASA funding bill because they hate our scientists.
Except they don't care at all about NASA, and they've shown that time and time again over the past decade.
I'm sorry,
like since Obama was president.
Yeah, who ended the space shuttle program? I believe that was Barack Obama.
Exactly. I was so mad when that happened. I was like, we're not going to space anymore. I was so angry. I mean, we still go to the International Space Station, but...
Right. But we haven't done a manned moon mission in decades or something?
We have so much new technology now. Why don't we go back?
I actually read an article, and maybe I shouldn't say this because I don't know if this is actually true, but somebody made the assertion that we actually don't really have the technology to go back and land on the moon. Like, we have to relearn that.
I bet Elon Musk does.
Yeah, I'm sure it wouldn't be a huge lift, but I think the point of it was like we don't really have any experts on moon landings that are around still. So we'd have to re-engineer it.
Whose freaking fault is that? We probably should have went back when all those people were still around.
Thanks, government.
Anyway, I don't remember where I was.
Senate.
This is Schumer's quote. He is quoted as saying, "The Senate will finally hold a debate on voting rights legislation for the first time in this Congress. And every senator will be faced with a choice of whether or not to pass this legislation to protect our democracy." Protect our democracy?
Yeah. More propaganda.
Yes. This does not give Democrats a clear path forward, however. They will still need 10 Republican votes to pass the bill. The bills, plural, sorry. And Republicans can still use the filibuster to delay proceedings. If the filibuster is used, however, Senator Schumer has the option to go nuclear. In this case, he would only need 50 votes plus that of Vice President Kamala Harris.
Which he won't get because Kamala Harris can only vote if there's a 50-50 tie. But if it's a 49-51... Actually, it's going to be 48-52 because Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, they wouldn't even vote for those bills anyway. I mean, maybe Kyrsten Sinema would, but I don't think Joe Manchin would vote for the voting rights legislation.
So it's going to be at least 49-51, if not 48-52.
Yeah.
So,
but here's the thing. So I was talking earlier about Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin possibly protecting moderate Democrats that didn't want to go on record. Well, Schumer has threatened to put everyone on record as a yes or no on this legislation. And I don't know if that's actually going to happen because I think they're already in for a shellacking in 2022. And so Schumer made the threat, but I don't know if he's going to I don't know if he's going to go through with it because
it wouldn't be good politics.
Well,
if
it would
did.
be damaging. I think he was just trying to get people scared enough to go with eliminating the filibuster. But
everybody knows that the Democrats are on the way out.
Yeah.
So I don't know that even the sitting Democrats really believe him.
Yeah, true.
You know?
Yeah, so it's hard to tell what's all going through their minds, but
it'd be so fun to be a fly on the wall.
I know.
In Congress and the House.
There's a lot of power being thrown around.
Like lately, I'm like, I wonder what it would be like to run for office. I don't think I would win, but if I did, it'd be kind of fun.
It would be kind of fun. I think that would be a lot of fun, but we'll see what happens.
If our whole system doesn't collapse first, maybe someday. But...
So I want to talk about this, which is the okay. So this is the Washington D.C. vaccine mandates that just went into effect either yesterday or today, January 15th.
It was today.
Today, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of guidelines here. Obviously, it's really stupid. You
need your ID to go anywhere, by the way.
That's true. Yeah, you need ID
according to the mayor
and proof of vaccination. So it's like, well, there's a lot of things I could say about this. Obviously, the mandates don't make any sense whatsoever, given what we know about vaccines and masking and all that stuff now that has finally been revealed. But the one thing that I discovered in the guidelines that I really wanted to go over because it stuck out to me was this little section here. This is from their PDF that you can download about their vaccine guidelines for public places. And it says, it's in the FAQ section. And so it says, for customers whose vaccination status has been verified previously, are we required to repeatedly check? And it says, yes. Vaccination status must be verified each time a patron enters, unless the vaccination records have been uploaded and linked to a membership that is verified with each entry, such as a gym. So the question would be, why would this be necessary? If you verified once, then you shouldn't have to keep getting re-verified. Well, what I think is that they're leaving the door open to change the definition of fully vaccinated.
For when you get your booster.
Right. So you may be fully vaccinated 1 week.
Right.
And then they institute a new mandate to get a booster. Now you're not vaccinated the next week.
Well, and Dr. Fauci has been on television saying this, that, we might need to change the definition of fully vaccinated as the boosters roll out. He said that. Those words came out of the horse's mouth.
Yeah.
The really ridiculous scenario that I pictured in my head is like, if you're at the gym and then you need to go back out to your car to get something and then you walk back into the gym, are they going to check your freaking vaccination card again?
Yeah.
After 5 minutes, you just had it checked? If they get really anal retentive about checking, be like, I just ran out to my car. Now you're going to check it again? It's like, well, I mean... could have changed in 5 minutes that you were gone.
Oh, I left my vaccine card in my gym bag in the gym. Sorry, you can't come in without an ID.
Well, can you go get my shit then? Yeah, I just picture ridiculous.
It's going to be ridiculous, and I'm supposed to go to D.C. sometime in the next month or two. Well, I'm going to go and see what I can, but it's like, it's going to be so weird to feel absolutely unwelcome in the nation's capital.
I mean, you're going to have to wear a mask everywhere you go.
Yeah.
You have to wear a mask outside.
I'm not going to do that, but...
You have to.
No, I'm not going to do it.
That's the law.
I don't care.
The police are going to come for you, boy.
If they tell me to put on a mask, I'll put it on until I go around the corner, and then I'll take it back off.
I don't have enough money to bail you out, by the way, so don't get arrested.
I do, so... But no, but it's like, I'm going to be... I feel unwelcome in my nation's capital. The supposed free beacon, the shining light on the hill, the bastion of freedom is... You can't go into dining, you can't go to indoor entertainment, you can't go to a freaking gym.
I know, which is so ridiculous for so many reasons.
Yeah, the number one, obviously, we can kick this freaking dead horse over and over again. Obesity is the number one comorbidity that you die with COVID, and they're going to make sure that you can't enter a gym unless you're vaccinated. I mean, I guess it's just... This is not public health. This is authoritarianism, plain and simple.
And I feel the same way. So when I lived in Baltimore is very close to DC. It's like 45 minutes. And I really wanted to go, but, the crime kept getting worse and worse. And, you had to have all of these things to go to the museums. And I was like, I've never been to DC and I probably never will if this continues, because I I don't feel welcome. I'm not going to be able to go anywhere
Right.
because I don't meet their qualifications. I also don't want to have to wear a mask in my nation's capital because I'm a citizen of this country. I shouldn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been inside the international airport in DC, but that doesn't count. I've never seen any of our national monuments, which is really upsetting to me.
Yeah,
I never
and you
have.
may never be able to.
I probably won't if they keep putting up walls around that city.
So anyway, that's the
Yeah.
one thing I think it's obvious that they're setting up all these mandates so that they can just change the definition of fully vaccinated whenever they want, and the mandates will stay in place, right?
Yeah. I mean, this isn't going to end until enough Americans go, we're just not listening. We're just not complying.
Yeah.
We're not going to do it anymore. And it might be uncomfortable at first to be called out for not wearing a mask or not having your vaccine card, but if enough people do it and endure that discomfort, we'll be done with this.
But the thing is, I guess you could say maybe it's a white pill, I don't know, but it's really only a few cities in the United States that have these mandates. It's like New York City,
that's true.
it's DC and Chicago, maybe Philadelphia. I don't recall. I know those three for
I
sure.
think Boston too.
But it's like nowhere in the middle of the country
No.
has a vaccine mandate.
Oh, Minneapolis.
California
is pretty
doesn't
bad,
even
too.
have vaccine mandates.
No, just I think LA and
LA does?
LA does for anyone 12 and up. They have a vaccine mandate and masks mandate still. And I want to say San Francisco does too.
Okay.
But like San Diego's really free and everywhere in Northern California is open and
Yeah.
doing whatever.
So it's like it's really
Oh,
only
it's
a handful
Seattle,
of cities,
too.
which is still unacceptable. But I think the vast majority of Americans have pretty much no one wears a mask.
Yeah.
No one checks your vaccination status. A lot of people don't even talk about, like, people that don't watch the news regularly or follow politics at all, it's not even a thought in their minds anymore.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people I work with are like still obsessed with it, but it is upsetting to me that I might not be able to fly soon.
Yeah.
Because
That's
I
true.
actually enjoy flying. I really like planes. I don't know why, but yeah. And the ability to travel freely has been taken away from so many of us. And
Yeah.
that's upsetting too. Like, I may never get to go to Europe ever again.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I'm really glad I did get to go when I did, but I was also 18, and as much as I appreciated it, I don't think I appreciated it as much as I should have because
Right.
you're 18 and you don't appreciate anything when you're 18. But I probably will never get to go back to any of those places that I went.
Yeah, well, it's a question, like, there is no end in sight to the vaccine mandates. Like, no
No.
government that I'm aware of has provided a date for when the vaccine mandates will end. It's because they want to keep them open indefinitely.
Yeah.
And you're going to start seeing really soon, I think, you're going to start seeing, oh, well, you can't enter our country unless you have the flu vaccination. And then they're going to push more and more. And then there's going to be a whole litany of vaccinations that you need just to exit the country that have never existed before. And it's like, that's coming. And so I think you're right. I think some of us are never going to be able to leave. I mean, probably be able to go to like Mexico or something, but
yeah, it's
we're
easy
never,
to get in and out of Mexico.
right. But we won't be able to go to Canada. We won't be
No.
able, not that I'd want to go, but you never,
It's beautiful there.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is,
but not Europe, not Canada.
no.
Yeah.
Maybe some countries in South America.
Yeah, I'm sure
And
South America
Africa.
probably doesn't care too much. It's only the Western nations that are like
I guess we could go to
super-
South Africa because they're getting kind of
No, but it's like, yeah, it's
right?
only the Western nations that are really like obsessed with this. It's like, come on, let's get
Yeah.
our act together. There's a reason why the rest of the world isn't losing their shit over this. It's like it's just we're so
Can
comfortable
I
that
vacation in Russia?
yeah, we're so comfortable that any little tiny threat to our health is a fire that needs to be put out for 3
Well,
years
that's
running.
because our population is mostly obese or at least overweight. So yeah, any tiny little health thing to somebody who's overweight or obese is actually threatening. So it's like maybe viruses and things are not actually the biggest threat. Maybe it's heart disease, which
Yeah.
is the number one killer in the United States every year for like 10 years running. But it's like maybe we need to get our physical forms into shape before we worry about if a flu is going to kill us.
Being
a thought.
fat is healthy. All right, here's you want to talk about Kara Cooney?
Yeah. So if you remember a few weeks ago, we talked about that Egyptologist who went woke and we basically ended it by saying, just do your job, or at the very least, leave the field and let somebody else do your job instead of claiming wokeness. Well, she's back in the chat.
Yeah.
And she just published a book, well, a few weeks ago, I guess, but it was like right after we talked about her. She published this book, and she got some things wrong.
Yeah.
So this is published by Campus Reform, and the headline reads, Professor's Woke History Book Gets Rosa Parks' Kyle Rittenhouse Facts Wrong.
Yeah.
Not a good look. Not a good look.
Yeah, this is going to be a ride, isn't it?
So this is written by Sterling Mosley on Thursday, January 6th. So this is more than a week ago now. But National Geographic has published University of California, Los Angeles professor Kara Cooney's book, which upon release contains historical errors about Rosa Parks and Kyle Rittenhouse.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting that he's referred as a historical error now?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Campus Reform obtained a copy of Cooney's ebook, a work of historical nonfiction on ancient Egyptian pharaohs that uses recent cultural history, which, according to the description, uncovers the reason why societies have so willingly chosen a dictator over democracy time and time again.
Okay, well, all right. There's a lot to unpack here already. So first of all...
She's ridiculous.
First of all, that might actually be an interesting book if democracy was an idea that existed in the ancient Egyptian times.
Right.
Democracy is a relatively new invention. I mean, the Greeks and the Romans did it to some extent, but it was still the autocrats. It was the affluent aristocrats that basically ran everything, the landowners. So the reason they didn't have democracy back then is because the idea literally wasn't invented.
And we talked about this the last time we talked about her, but kings are not dictators. They're not the same thing.
Yeah.
Not usually. I mean, they can be if they abuse their power, but it's like a monarchy and a dictatorship are two very different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because a monarchy can be constrained in some way by another court or something.
Right. Well, you have your lords.
Right.
Well, in like British history, right? You have your lords and your dukes, and they have control of different lands and different cities, and you still have to consult them. I mean, your say is end all be all, but like you listen to your people.
Mm-hmm.
Dictators don't do that. They say, you don't agree with me, to the chopping block with you.
Chopping block.
So I'm like, you study ancient Egypt, and yet you cannot get pharaohship into your mind that it's monarchy.
Right.
Like, I don't understand.
And it's beyond that too, right? They were essentially gods. So it wasn't, it was like a divine monarchy.
Right. Exactly. So I don't think she's super credible. But the publication, The Good Kings, Absolute Power in Ancient Egypt and the Modern World, asserts that Rosa Parks took a seat in the white section of a public bus and started the Montgomery bus boycott. But actually, if you go to the next one, Parks was not seated in the white section of the bus, but rather just behind the front white section, the Henry Ford Museum of American Innovation explains on its website. When every seat in the white section was taken, the bus driver ordered the black passengers in the middle row to stand so a white man could sit. The seamstress refused, the museum text states.
Okay.
So she didn't sit in the white section. She was in the black section, but just didn't want to get up for a white guy.
I see.
So she got that wrong.
Okay.
Which I guess is an easy mistake to make.
Right.
But if you're going to cite history...
Maybe do some research.
Also, if you're a historian and an archaeologist, why would you not do your due diligence?
Well, this is what I didn't want to get into this until we got to the full article, but it's like the fact that you get basic things wrong about history really calls into question the entirety of the body of your work.
Exactly.
Like, you missed an easily verifiable historical fact.
She's written multiple books, too. And she's probably tenured at her university.
So how much is she getting wrong about ancient Egypt? Exactly. Just flat out wrong or making it up?
I don't know.
It's like, how can you think that she's credible at all?
I don't.
Yeah, it's like, well, I'm not saying you do. Actually,
but I also feel that she's swindled her students wildly, because I'm sure she's taught them a lot of false information.
I feel like if you're going to swindle students, being an Egyptologist is the best way to do it. Because, like, well, you know, like kids want to learn about Egypt and want to be Egyptologists. Yeah. So I feel like that's the best place for a charlatan professor to be.
Well, because it's so easy to make shit up because, like, it's not your culture. You'd not maybe it is, maybe, but probably not. I mean, if you're an American student, you're not from Egypt. It's not your history. It's not your culture. You're not going to know any better. You're putting your trust in this professor who says they know things about Egypt, and she's probably just a phony.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then the next whoopsie doozies is, or consider, this is a quote from her book, or consider 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse, who used his semi-automatic weapon to kill 2 black men in Kenosha. Cooney wrote. Rittenhouse killed 2 white men, which his legal representation argued during the trial was in self-defense.
Okay, now this article is actually wrong because, like, okay, yeah, they did argue that, but the trial's over. You can say that it was found to be self-defense.
On all charges.
Right.
All charges. Right. He was innocent.
So it's like...
or not guilty anyway.
So that's almost a dishonest framing, too. His legal representation said it was self-defense. No, the court found that it was self-defense across the board.
Months ago. Anyway. And the error was apparently corrected in the ebook, which now states that Rittenhouse killed 2 white men in Kenosha, Wisconsin, while waging a glorious race war.
And there you
go.
go.
So she still put the race thing in there, even though there was no racial context to anything that Rittenhouse did in Kenosha, which you can go back and watch all of the trial live streams if you're so inclined, and you will see the facts firsthand instead of from other news sources.
Yeah,
but also, it's like, you published how many copies of this book with these falsehoods in it? So yes, you corrected it in your ebook, but how many hard copies are out there that you didn't fact check your own work?
Right. Well,
I hate to say fact check, but like, when it comes to actual historical events, you can actually fact check those things.
Yeah, you can find primary documents and whatnot, but... Yeah,
especially the Rittenhouse thing. It's so easy to find actual evidence of
she just
what
needs to learn to take the L. Like, if you're going to edit it, just remove the Kyle Rittenhouse reference. Like, just remove it.
Oh, you're going to love what she says when she takes the L, though.
But also, like, a glorious race war, that's libelous, isn't it? To assert that Kyle Rittenhouse was waging a race war?
Well, was she saying that he did it, or that a wage war, or...
A wage war? Oh my goodness, are you getting communist over there?
A race war was waging in Kenosha, separate from his... Yes. Raging.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, race war was waging.
Raging. Just get over that word, waging.
I feel like I have a speech impediment. Okay. So she tweeted on January 5th of this year, on page 341 of The Good Kings, I state that Kyle Rittenhouse shot 2 black men when instead he shot 2 white men. That was my mistake, and I apologize. The response has been a hateful stew. I think she meant slew. A hateful stew of ridicule and denial that America has a race problem at all. So a non-apology apology.
Yeah, and of course turning it into these people can never just apologize and not make themselves the victim.
Correct.
Like, oh, I'm apologizing, but also I've received so much hate and the people that are criticizing me are still in the wrong.
Yep.
Like, what is wrong with people? You know,
they don't have any humility.
Yeah, people are more admirable when you admit a fault and then you just leave it there. You say, sorry, I was wrong. That's it.
Yep.
Don't need to turn it into, I'm the victim. Don't need to
It's because they're prideful. They can't not make it about them.
Well, if you're a college professor and you're an Egypt expert, ostensibly.
So she claims.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think, this is one example, but it's hard not to see how this could be indicative of, especially the softer areas of higher education. Like, the hard sciences is one thing. Like, if you're wrong in the hard sciences, you're just wrong, right?
There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You're
right,
just wrong.
But if you're in, like, the sociology, the arts, and all this stuff, like, it's hard not to imagine that there's more people like this that just aren't making an ass of themselves regularly, Yeah. So I don't know. Anyway, is there anything else you want to talk about?
I had pulled this article about Russia and Ukraine, and I kind of wanted to see what you thought about that.
All right, yeah, let's go over it.
So this is from MSN, or NBC News, I guess. But,
yeah.
U.S. intel suggests Russia is preparing a false flag operation as pretext for Ukraine invasion. This was published yesterday.
Yeah, I have heard this. I have heard of this. So
So the U.S. has information that the Russian government is planning a false flag operation to rationalize an invasion of Ukraine, a government official said Friday, which was yesterday. We have information that indicates Russia has already pre-positioned a group of operatives to conduct a false flag operation in eastern Ukraine. The operatives are trained in urban warfare and in using explosives to carry out acts of sabotage against Russia's own proxy forces, the official said, confirming a CNN report. And then it goes on to say, for weeks, as concerns have grown about a potential Russian invasion, U.S. national security officials have warned publicly that Russia was likely to spread misinformation about ongoing diplomatic efforts to muddy the waters and to try to drive a wedge between the U.S. and its NATO and European allies. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki told reporters Friday at her daily briefing that the intelligence shows Russia, quote, is laying the groundwork to have the option of fabricating a pretext for invasion.
yeah, so I mean, it could be true. I have a hard time believing anything the U.S. government says at any moment now.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, the interesting thing that happened though was that Ukraine had a cyber attack. I believe last Thursday or something like that. The comments, oh no, I guess it was yesterday or this past Thursday. I don't remember, but the comments came hours after Ukraine was hit by a massive cyber attack, warning its citizens to expect the worst. Ukraine's foreign ministry spokesperson told Reuters it was too early to say who could be behind the attack, but that Russia had been behind similar strikes in the past. And we actually have the cyber attack message, and it was posted in Ukrainian, Russian, and Polish. So,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Where was
so
it posted? Just
It was on everybody's computer screens.
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So if you tried to log onto the internet, I think this popped up to everyone in Ukraine, but there's Ukrainians, Russians, and Poles that live there.
Right.
So, Ukrainian, all your personal data was uploaded to the public network. All data on the computer is destroyed. It is impossible to restore it, said a message visible on hacked government websites written in Ukrainian, Russian, and Polish. All information about you has become public. Be afraid and expect the worst. This is for your past, present, and future.
Wow.
So that would be really scary to read that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that is scary. But it's like
if you're Ukrainian, like, and you know that there's Russian troops lining up on your border, that would be a really scary message to read.
Yeah, it is. But it's like at the same, it's like I don't like. Where's the screenshots? Right.
Oh, there actually was one, and where I got that.
I just have such a hard time believing anything that the U.S. government says about anything, specifically foreign relations. I mean, we lied our way into the Iraq War, lied our way into Afghanistan.
Yeah. Do you think this is a lie to try to get into war with Russia?
I don't think we're trying to get into war with Russia. I think that, well, I don't know. I don't even know if it's true. Like I can't speculate. If it's not, if it's a lie made up by the U.S. government, I think it's to make Russia look bad.
Well, so I guess I should have pulled the screenshot of that warning. But yeah, where I got the translation from, they did have a picture of somebody's screen in the Ukraine, and it was in letters that I can't read, but it was like gray. Oh, sorry. It was like gray with a red border.
Okay.
And each language was in its own separate box, and it looked scary.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Russia seems to be eager to take Ukraine, so maybe.
I mean, they've been that way for a long time, though, right?
Yeah. So maybe, I mean, it's possible that they're. I don't know. I don't know what to think. Like the U.S. government has put itself in the unfortunate position where I would be a fool to believe what they're telling me.
Yeah.
And so it's like, but let's just set that aside. Let's set aside. Let's say Russia is doing all this. What are we gonna do about it?
Well, I worry that we're gonna get pulled into a NATO war.
But that's what I'm saying. I don't even think that will happen. Ukraine's not part of NATO.
Yeah.
So the only reason NATO would get involved is because we volunteered to get involved, and I don't see the U.S. public supporting that at all. Like
we've made public statements though saying that we would support Ukraine.
Yeah, but Barack Obama also made a public statement that if gas attacks were used in Syria, that would be a red line, and he'd freaking crush Assad, and that didn't happen. So it's like these people are full of shit.
Yeah.
They're not going to do anything regardless of what Russia does. So I don't know why I'm frustrated. Like, why are we pretending like this is important? We all know Joe Biden is not going to do a damn thing if Russia decides to invade Ukraine.
Do you think that he should?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, you do sanctions maybe, but it's like it sucks for the Ukraine people. But this is in Europe's backyard. If Europe's so concerned about Russia, stop getting pipelines built into your countries and raise your own damn army.
True.
I'm so sick of everyone expecting the U.S. to do everything regarding global relations when our country is literally falling apart at home.
Yes.
It's like, Europeans, do your own dirty work. I'm so sick of these people just riding off of the coattails of our military. It's like,
I am also sick of that, but that also doesn't mean that we won't get pulled into a war if a war breaks out between Russia and Ukraine. I mean, it won't be much of a war. I mean, Russia's just going to take Ukraine if that happens. But if somehow we get sucked into it, that's going to be really hard on our people when we're already in a really terrible place.
Right.
Which is why I wanted to talk about
what I'm saying, though, is I don't think there's a way for us to get sucked in unless Joe Biden decides that he's going to take action. And I don't think that he's going to take it.
He's got no spine. So.
Right. And I don't think he's, I mean, Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine when Joe Biden was the vice president.
Right.
There's no reason to believe that he's going to do absolutely anything. And if he does, then yeah, we'll get sucked into a war, which no one in the United States is going to tolerate.
No.
So it's like,
nobody will back it.
If I'm Russia, I'm basically just like, I can take Ukraine whenever I want. Now, there was an interesting thought that perhaps Russia and China are coordinating behind the scenes to do simultaneous invasions of Ukraine and Taiwan to split U.S. attention.
I've been wondering about that. It was kind of... I didn't read that somebody had put that into words, but it is something that's been kind of churning in my mind because tensions are rising with China and Taiwan while tensions are rising with Russia and Ukraine. And Joe Biden has said publicly that we would protect Taiwan and we would protect Ukraine. So it's like, you're making these statements very close together. So I wouldn't be surprised if, Putin and Xi Jinping had some kind of weird alliance going where it's mutually beneficial.
Yeah.
And they made some kind of backdoor deal because they're not exactly allies, right? But
they're getting closer, but yeah.
But they're not currently allies. So I wouldn't be surprised if something like that,
Well, I think they are
put them into
allies to an extent.
Alliance.
I think they are allies to an extent.
Yeah.
I think they're united in their desire to make the U.S. look bad.
Well, that's what I mean. So they're in an alliance of sorts, but they're not. I don't think
so.
It's direct.
I think if you wanted to absolutely humiliate the United States, you take both places that the United States has vowed to protect and watch the United States do nothing.
For both places. Yeah.
Watch. We're not going to do a damn thing.
Well, we can't. I mean, our military is still strong, so we could, but our leadership is weak, I would say.
Yeah, and I don't even think it's not necessary. Like, we know Joe Biden's weak, but I just don't think that the American public, no matter who the leader was, would support any intervention for Taiwan or Ukraine. So it's like, we're in this position now where we just got out of a long 20-year war. We lost the country in 3 days after our withdrawal. The United States population has absolutely no appetite for conflict at all right now, and we have a weak old man as a president anyway. So it's like, if I'm China, and Russia right now, I'm just like looking to see what can I take before whatever Republican wins in 2024.
I mean, they got 3 years. They can do a lot of damage in 3 years.
Yep.
I mean, it's not really our problem. Like, Asia and Europe are not our problems, but at the same time, if somehow we do decide we're going to go help Taiwan or Ukraine or both, it's going to be devastating to our military and it's going to be devastating to our people. And it's probably not going to help our economy.
I mean, we'll be forced to make a choice. And I think, if I don't know, maybe the U.S. military can handle both conflicts at the same time. I have my doubts about that.
I don't know. I don't think so.
I think that the more strategic move, if we were going to engage in war, would be over Taiwan, because that's where the semiconductor manufacturing happens for chips, right? For computer chips. So it's like,
sorry,
if you had to
Ukraine.
make it right, Ukraine is literally nothing to the United States, and Taiwan makes all of our high-tech gadgets. So it's like, which one are you going to choose if you had to choose?
Yeah, why do all of these small nations not have military strength? I mean, I get that they don't have the sheer numbers, but it seems like they don't even invest in technology. They don't invest in supplies. They don't invest in training. They just kind of assume that another larger power is going to swoop in and help them.
Well, so the U.S. has been working with Taiwan to develop their military, including selling them weapons and fighters and stuff like that. So the U.S. is working closely with Taiwan to arm them and train them. Taiwan said that they'd be able to hold off a Chinese attack pretty well. So we'll see.
Well, that's good, I guess.
We'll see if it even happens. I don't know. That's the thing with like these geopolitical conflicts. It's like, it's all so gray. You don't know what's going to happen. And we certainly aren't getting the full truth.
Yeah.
So
there was, I don't know if I took a screenshot of the, this is this the one? I don't remember.
So this one says,
I think so.
Russia has massed more than 100,000 troops on its neighbor's frontier. The Russian government has denied it has plans to attack Ukraine, but aired footage of more forces deploying to the area on Friday. Russian officials met with their U.S., European, and NATO counterparts over the past week as they sought diffuse tensions, How are these people?
I know.
They write for a living and they can't write.
Yeah, well, they don't edit.
Tensions between the two countries. But in the aftermath of those talks, the Biden administration has said it believes a Russian incursion into Ukraine remains a real possibility. The drumbeat of war is sounding loud, a senior U.S. diplomat says.
There's one about they discussed trilateral talks, and I might not have screenshotted that part.
But yeah, anyway, so it's like, Europe is very missing from this conversation. Like they supposedly had talks between the Europe and NATO and the U.S. and it's like, but it's
why is the US
I never
involved?
hear about European troops doing
Where's
something.
Poland?
Right.
Where's the Czech Republic?
I don't know. It just seems like we're bearing a whole lot of the responsibility for resolving the world's conflicts, and like Europe has to step up. They have to step up. They have to start, like, if you're going to have a European Union, raise a European army. Like, what's the
deal with that?
Why do we need to be a member of NATO? Why does the U.S. need to be involved in that? There's European, if you add up all of the EU, there's like 600 million people. It's a very wealthy economy. You can raise your own army and you can protect your own backyard.
Yep.
And that includes in the Middle East because guess what? They're connected via land
Correct.
to the Middle East. So it's like we're surrounded by two oceans. We can raise our own army, and I support having a massive army for the United States, a massive military, but that's for our own defense.
Right.
That's not so that we can protect Europe and Ukraine and Taiwan.
Right.
And we wouldn't need to be in that position, specifically in the case of Taiwan, if we manufactured our damn computer chips here.
Right.
Why are we not self-sufficient for all of our critical things?
Well,
for all of
the
our
other
critical
thing
supplies?
I was thinking about too is the only reason we would intervene in Ukraine was, so I guess we're allies, but what do they bring to the table that makes them a suitable ally? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like what are we getting out of that partnership? Why do we need to protect Ukraine? Just because we're allies?
That's what I can't figure out.
But why are we allies in the first place? Does that go all the way back to World War II?
Well, I think it's you see this all throughout modern history. That's just one of those buffer countries that like is right up against Russia, which is an adversary of the United States. So you can kind of use it as like a way to poke Russia or contain Russia.
Yeah.
But I just don't think that strategy seems to not be very effective in the age of when you have digital. Like they did cyber attacks, which is like you could call that psychological warfare if they're those threats could have been totally empty, but it's still psychological warfare. Mm. They're demonstrating their ability to hack government websites.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know if that strategy of containment, then you have like Russian separatists that are in Ukraine fighting right now that Russia is maintaining like plausible deniability. They're not ours, you know? So it's like we're in this era of warfare where I'm not even sure that having that buffer state of Ukraine is really that effective in countering Russian aggression, you know?
Yeah, I can't figure out why we would need to be allies with Ukraine anymore.
I don't know either. Taiwan makes sense.
Because there's natural resources there, or resources maybe not so natural, but there's resources there that we need for our own economy. So it makes sense economically. But yeah, with Ukraine, there isn't any reason. Pipeline, maybe?
No,
but I don't think we benefit from that.
We don't benefit. Yeah, I don't. I don't know. You'd have to ask the people that are drafting the policy at the top. So
I guess we don't really have to read the rest of this. I mean, they basically are just saying that they made a big deal out of it just to say that it's not a big deal. and they're just gonna keep on giving talks with each other, having talks with each other to try to solve the problem. And I don't know why we need to be involved in those conversations.
Yeah. Well, we'll see next week where we're at with this situation,
Yeah.
because it sounds like if anything's going to happen, it's going to happen soon. So,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Well, and next week too, I should be able to follow up on that sketchy teacher
Oh, yeah.
who was giving the vaccine to her 17-year-old student. So
Cool.
I think that'll be next week.
All right, then. Well, that's it for this episode of Take Your Medicine. Again, I'm Jacob.
And I'm Sadie.
And we'll see you in the next one. Be sure to follow us at all of our channels. Links are in the description wherever you're listening or watching this video.
Thanks so much.